Alright, so first off, you may notice if you've seen this tank before or recently that there is an immense amount of stuff missing. You can actually see the media that is full of bio rings back there. I have split the lily into two again, and I have also trimmed everything down. Now from this tank, we still have a lot floating, and we have this wonderful pile of totally viable plants. We got everything from wisteria to Pogostemon erectus to Pogostemon octopod to Limnophilia aromatica, also Java ferns, so all sorts of good stuff. But I wanted to show you what I did. So basically, I am just using gravel in too many fish. So we got a lot of fish in here, and right now it's stirred up because I was just digging in the substrate. And I've got some boost and other stuff floating in the ether. And basically what I do is I take the plants from my high-tech tank that has CO2 in it and ADA soil, and I put it into this magical 40-gallon. Now, the bigger the system, the better off you are in tanks as far as just algae control and blooms of things. It's just harder for those things to occur. So, as you can see, my maniacal plan is going straight to the letter. It's working. But what I did is all these plants in the front here are covered, as you can see, in algae from being in the other tank with the CO2 and the high ferts and the crazy ammonia. Now they grow really, really, really fast. Like, I'm talking 1 inch to 2 inches in a day. But they're covered in algae. And if you try to take it off one piece at a time, you'll be there forever. So this wonderful tank here is full of critters like the Siamese algae eater, which I highly recommend, although they can be a little frisky and chase each other around and fight, and they get big. They can get 5 or 6 inches, which to a lot of people is big, but they're good at what they do, and that's eating algae. So what I like to do is take some of the plants that have been covered in algae, and I put them right up here in the front, and I just let my algae eaters go to work, and they will do that, and they will fatten up. Algae is a lot of water and a lot of fluff, so they can eat a lot of it, and you see how tempted they are just to eat it already. And now sometimes they get overzealous, and especially the Siamese algae eaters, they'll do this little nibble thing where they'll rip like delicate plants. But you can see the Corydoras cleaning up a crypt back there. You can see the teeny tiny little delicate plants, even these 3.5-inch long Siamese algae eaters are actually very delicate. If you watch them, they're very delicate the way they eat. And so they'll clean up these plants for me. Meanwhile, the plants will grow. They don't need to grow quite as fast. But what I do in this tank is, this is all my starts. So I put root tabs and a little bit of liquid fertilizer in here. And then I've got these 2 spots in broken glass, which I need to make a new lid for this thing. But I have 2 spots that are 30-watt LEDs, and those really cause stem plants to grow like on steroids. And so I use that, and I trim everything up about once a month, and I have kind of my set areas where fish use the bathroom, as we all do, and their poo goes down, and then the snails and the shrimp and other things will dig through that and kind of render it less harmful and more just full of nutrients, so fertilizer. And basically that ends up following these angles of the stones and wood that I've put in here. And it all kind of falls between the power head and the hang off the back. It all falls in the front of the bow, in the dead center, and then at the edges of these creases. And that's exactly where I just load it up with all sorts of plants, so you almost would think they're too crowded. So they're getting a lot of nutrients, not necessarily from the gravel or any of the substrate here, but really the light and the water. So a lot of these plants will start growing these runners and things up here. And that's so that they can get more nutrients than out of just the water. But there's a lot of fish in here, and so they produce a lot of nitrates. And with all the good bacteria in here and the extra biomedia up in there and hidden behind in this cave, we've got lots going on. And believe it or not, even tetras and little fish like that, guppies, endlers, they will also eat algae. And so as long as your tank hasn't been overblown and overgrown by a bloom of algae, you can take plants with algae in them, and things like crebensis, they're also great algae eaters. Right here you can see sometimes they'll eat new buds of plants and things, and so be careful with that if it's something really rare, but usually they do much more good than harm. And we've got nearite snails, but I literally put this stuff in here not even, I don't know, 15 minutes ago, and it's already getting munched on and cleaned up. So probably by tomorrow or the next day it'll be cleaned up. Peacock gudgeons are going to clean it. The Habrosus corridoras are even eating it. Everybody likes it, and I haven't fed this tank today, really. I gave him a pinch of some protein, brine shrimp, freeze-dried brine shrimp, but they want their salad now. So I probably won't feed this tank for 2 days, and that's okay for fish even if they didn't eat anything. But rather than not eating anything, that will cut down on the ammonia or waste production, even though that's pretty in check. But you can see a couple other places where I put plants. The algae eaters have grown immensely. They grow right now probably a centimeter every week or two because I've been using this method. And this is a method, if you have 2 or 3 tanks, I highly, highly, highly recommend. I've kind of figured it out, gotten it down to, let's call it a science, myself. But so this is probably, I don't know, 30 plants that I'll be able to plant. And I'll be taking these downstairs and putting them into the younger tanks. Now, right now, I'm looking at a piece that I must have missed, and it has algae on it. Now, if this has black algae on it rather than some of the hair algae or slime algae and things, I'm not going to introduce it into my tank, certain types of blackbeard algae and things like that. But the fuzzy stuff, a lot of these, if you have the right fish and the right cleanup crew, they handle it no problem. Now, you need to be careful when you trim everything down that you don't throw off the balance in your tank, because you had all these plants that were using this nutrients, and the nutrients are toxic to the fish, and you get rid of it, and there's repercussions to that. But if you do it right, you can have a healthy tank and a steady tank, and you can also use things like, that's why, 1, for fry, but 2, I like to let a certain amount of like hornweed and hornwort, whatever you want to call it, pearlweed, whatever, those kinds of things, kabamba, water sprite, wisteria, things like that grow really fast and suck up nitrates. Water lettuce you can also use if you have, or salvinia, things like that you can use, and they suck up nitrates and they grow like none other. And so that keeps the fish in balance in case, that's kind of your buffer in case you trim too much. And here I may have trimmed too much, but hopefully these plants will use that to grow as fast as they can, and that will work out great. Now, in my slower growing tanks, like this one, which doesn't really grow very fast, the lights are not super duper awesome, but I still will cut the tall spots away, and I will take these plants, especially since this is supposed to be a rockscape first and foremost. And you can see I'm doing the same thing. It doesn't always look good, but if I'm having company over or going to do a photo shoot or something, I will kind of hide it or tuck it away. You can literally just tuck it down behind some rocks and things. But what I do is I just then go through and I trim whatever needs to be trimmed. Here is some more Pogostemon erectus. You can see here that I've also got shrimp and the cleanup crew in there, snails in there. I'd like to get some more Malaysian trumpet snails because they really turn over the substrates a lot. But everybody's happy in here still. And I'm going to take these tops of the plants that are really healthy and clean, and I'm going to put those in the downstairs tanks that aren't as old. Because as a tank matures, it's able to handle more and more. So this is an example of these were all covered in, algae to the point where I thought there was no coming back from it. And now you can see they've sprouted because in that other tank they weren't getting what they needed in the gravel. But they've sprouted and boom, they're growing great. This red scarlet temple plant is doing awesome. And it had started in a high-tech tank, so the CO2 is going to use there. And then it moves over to the big tank, and then it comes over to here. And inevitably, then I trim it and I replant it. And so you can do that, and you can trim it and replant it, stem plants, at any time. The more you trim it, even though it's scary, folks, I know sometimes, like these, like, oh, I've got this nice growth going on. If I trim all this down to about here, oftentimes it'll grow back forked. So the last place I trimmed this one was right here, and that's why there's 2 shoots there. So next time I can cut right above that on each, and there'll be 4. But I want to cut a little lower, get it denser lower down. Now, with crypts and like tiger lilies, things like that, that's a whole other thing that we'll talk about later. But with these rotalas, this is a rotala pink from Vietnam, and rotala rotundifolia are what we're talking about here. And I'm going to go ahead and come in here with scissors. You can just use normal kitchen shears or, whatever scissors you have that work for you, that you're comfortable with. And you can go ahead and do the same thing. And I basically, so this one here is Limnophilia aromatica. You can see that purple underneath. But I'm basically just coming in, and it's going to look like a hack job compared to what I did. And you just have to trust this process here and kind of close your eyes and hold your breath. Right now we got Boost floating around. That's another little thing is I like to let the Boost in my tank, the Boost loose. I will let the Boost loose and let it float around the house. And that allows all the rhizomes to all get a little bit of exercise, so to speak, and get their nutrients in. And you can also plant it, but you want to leave these rhizomes out somewhat. And I like to trim the ones that get insane unless it's in a crevice that it's okay to just chill like that in. And then the other thing you want to do when you're trimming your plants, just get rid of this. So come back in later. I'll do it when it's not being filmed. But come back and get rid of all these dead leaves and stuff. You can have things like catappa leaves, almond leaves, stuff that's been dried out and that's hardy, leathery. That's great stuff to have in the tank because it'll do just fine. But with the other ones, you want to be careful. Also, I just wanted to show you that, so this Boost has been floating around a little bit. This is a Blue Ghost, and it's gotten a little bit wild, and it's also gotten chewed on by somebody. I think it's a snail. But it's got a nice blue luster to it, and it was in the other tank, and I pulled it out. I think the Siamese algae eaters got a little rough on it. And then I'll just tuck it in there or let it float, but there should be a spike and a little flower that'll come out of there soon. So as you can see, I'll tuck the roots back in there too. And I actually, before this filming, I cut both plants from one. So it was one plant, and I chopped it down into 2. So I'm going to cut again here. I know that looks like we're real close to the ground, and we are. But it will grow back. And the thing you have to be careful about is that ammonia spike and making sure that there's enough plants to pick up the slack. So what I'll do is I'll also go grab more cuttings out of the tank, inch or 2 out of the big tank, and they'll replace what I just took out and grow. So all this stuff, so just from the trimming I just did on film, which is about a quarter of what I did today, now you can see the rocks again. We'll have to come back in and clean it all up, tidy it up. A lot of things get folded behind other things. Right now all the floating plants are going crazy and whatnot. But now we can add this stash to our pile of plants that are going downstairs. And, ideally keep them in a wet bucket or whatever. But now to replace that, what I can do is I can cut like that. It just depends on how much of a hurry you're in and how much space you want to use in the tank. But now that these were cleaned from the other day, I can cut these off, in half and go put them in the other tank, and they'll be using up that energy. And I don't have to risk what happens when the equation is off kilter. So in here, you'll see that I've also done a lot of trimming. I took this whole clump out, if you can see this, so that will be coming out. Luckily, I love these lights. They're waterproof. I haven't shocked myself yet, knock on wood. But all this Glosso and the Anubias gold coin coming out of there, more aromatica, Limnophilia aromatica being chopped and coming out of there. These are a harder one to clean. They like to be rooted and stay rooted, and so I let that occur frequently. But anything that's kind of taken hold and doesn't want to let go, I tend to allow it to do its thing. Sometimes the tools don't work as well as just your finger, but just be gentle. And as you can see, this is turning into kind of a root ball focus mess, but I just let it do that, especially in these newer tanks. This one's only, 5 weeks old now. And so I let it do that, and now I've trimmed things, and this has that algae on it again. And it's because I'm blasting it with light, I'm blasting it with CO2. I'm using fertilizers of several sorts on it. I'm adding iron. Basically, it's a slaughter. So I'm gonna also cut this guy out. Now that's a big chunk to cut out, right? So I'm gonna cut that out. That can go downstairs into the other tanks, and then we're gonna cut out. Even though it's pretty, and I know you guys, you think you grow it and you're like, oh man, it's so pretty, I don't want to cut it. Trust me, cut it, it'll grow back, as long as you don't hack the plant like really bad, and it'll grow back even stronger. So here you can see where I did the last cut, which is right there. And I did the last cut where that branch is off. So now if I plant this plant, hold on, let me focus in. So now if I plant this, we've got this branch off this fork, and so it has algae on it. So it'll be going in the big tank through that process, which I highly recommend if you have a big established tank. You can then have one tank that you just pump like full of steroids, and steroids have a toll that they take on your body, just like in bodybuilding or something. Like, you can't do it forever. It's gonna break down at some point. Your body just wasn't designed to handle that level of intensity for that long. And so basically I'll be taking all these guys with the algae and the problems, taking them to the big tank that can handle it and is used to processing algae and is very, very stable. And I will use this unstable young tank. There, I just got rid of algae. Now I'll clean the rocks later. I got rid of algae, and that algae ate up a lot of nutrients that was too much for the tank. It was too much ammonia and other things in the tank. And I took care of both issues as well as the way it looks in one foul swoop. And so I'm going to keep cutting in here. We'll cut. over here, when I get this one out, it'll be a good example of one that's been trimmed like 5 or 6 times. So these are great to replant. So this is what you're going for with stem plants. So here we have a stem plant that has been cut, and let's focus, that has been cut, and it's been cut, if we let it float in the water for a sec, it's been cut several times. So 1, 2, 3 times it's been cut, and now a 4th. And this now can be planted, and we'll have at least 3, if not 4, or even more stalks that come up very densely, and that's just sucking more energy out of the system, which, if you're trying to grow these things, that's the ultimate goal anyhow, is to just get that, pulling it out of the system like there's no tomorrow, and you just pump it in and pull it out. And so we're going to take these clippings here, and I'm going to look for the ones that are too, so this one I would say has too much algae to want to introduce it into a small tank downstairs, like a 20-gallon or something. And so because of that, I don't want these ones with crazy algae in a tank that doesn't have a bunch of critters that eat algae all day. And all my tanks have something that eats algae, but not the elite Delta Force algae eaters that have assembled in this other tank, nor the cycle of it basically being used to being starved of food, and the fish all liking the algae. They've been trained to eat the algae and like it. So now we have all this stuff ready to go downstairs, plus the other pile, and this stuff will be planted, and I will show you the end result when it's done. So let's catch back up in just a minute. But you get the idea. You see the program. Try it out. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you've tried something similar. And if it works for you, great. If you have something like, oh, don't do that because of X, Y, or Z, let me know that too. Don't forget to like, share, and if you're still watching now, subscribe if you haven't already. And hold on in a minute, and we'll be back with the results of the replantings. Alright guys, so now we're downstairs finishing up this video. I've got my shrimp tanks, and I'm floating more stuff on top of the water, floating stuff like the trimmings even of the glosso, if you will, the boosts, little things like that aren't even tall enough to plant yet a lot of times, and things like Java ferns. I'll just let them float. The shrimp will clean them up, and these older tanks, it'll be all good. There's already algae that I leave for the shrimp. This has 3 types of shrimp in it. It has the crystals, it has honey bee shrimp, and it has blue dwarfs, along with Babalti green shrimp. Now, this tank has King Kong red, black, and it also has, what else is going on here? The cherry sakura red fires. So this tank also, I allow to have trimmings floating of things like wisteria, water sprite, and just anything that, hornwort, anything that quickly absorbs nitrates, because you definitely don't want nitrates with your shrimp. Now here I'm raising endlers and Pelvica chromis tinniatus bipindis, and so what I've done here is I've planted a whole bunch of those stems from upstairs. This looked pretty bare before, if you remember from past videos, and then we have a giant mess, sorry about the reflection, a giant mess of stuff floating. And that's great, because things like the shrimp, things like the snails, they'll help clean that up a little bit. Now, it can get algae because it's closer to the top, but that is also, these plants are alive, and many of these plants are fine floating, and they will still, instead of sucking out of root tabs and the mulm stuff that's in the ground from the fish poop, they'll keep the water column clean as long as they have oxygenation and CO2 being in the air and coming through the airline. Now up here, same deal. I am a little less sentimental about this line of Japanese blue endlers, as well as some Cory cats and another Pelvichromis tinniatus lacunga mix, as well as Maliwe mix. that's going on in here. It's mostly females in the colony and a rainbow fish that doesn't know it's not a guppy. But same deal. I planted all through in here. It doesn't look real pretty right now. It's not scaped, but you can already see, I literally did this 15 minutes ago. They're even cleaning up the algae. And so if you have the right fish, you need fish on the bottom, fish in the middle, and fish on the top, and they will clear it all up. I can come back through in a week. Obviously, I'll check on it daily when I feed and things like that, but as I see things like if it's starting to yellow and clearly is just going to produce an ammonia spike because it's dead plant material, I'll get it out of there. Then that's, I'll pull out the leaves, and a lot of times I'll wait an hour or two, see what floats to the top. This is a good time to do a water change as well, get all the levels down low. In here, looking like a new tank, everything's chopped down low. The guppies, for some reason, and endlers are eating away at all the stuff. Now these in the back, all these plants were up really high. Now they're trimmed down really low, and the last thing I have to do is I've got some, it feels slimy. I have some slimy, grimy, algae-covered trimmings that are really short, like too short to plant short. Like, well, this one wasn't, but like, for instance, this one, like, what are you gonna, you could try to plant it, but I usually let those float. And I let those float and just let them be lunch for the guppies, so to speak. And now this tank is all trimmed down low. The other tanks downstairs are good. Now, if you didn't have another tank to bring this stuff to the end result, like here, I'm just basically filling out all my tanks. By the way, look how beautiful these plants are looking right now. Just awesome. That is awesome. Those are from aquaticarts.com. If you go there, use the code SHRIMP or Secret Shrimp number 10, all caps, and they'll hook you up with 10% off the entire site. So that is pretty rad deal that you can get hooked up with through the channel if you want to use it. And then over at LRB Aquatics, as you saw those, we dropped one. You saw the shrimp downstairs. Any of the shrimp that you want, LRB Aquatics, he's got tons of neo shrimp, like cherry shrimp and dwarf shrimp of different varieties. And then Flip Aquatics has all those Caridina shrimp that you saw. That's where I got all those. So I have my 3 go-to sources for different elements of things online when you can't find it locally, or if you don't have a place locally, you're out in the sticks somewhere that I'd like to be right about now. You can go that way. Use the code at Flip Aquatics history with a capital H, and then normal other letters, and then 10, and that will get you 10% off his site as well. So for Flip, it's history with a capital H, and then the number 10, no spaces. And then for aquaticarts.com, it is, once more, it is Secret Shrimp, no spaces, all capital, and the number 10 together, and you'll get 10% off. Both great places, highly recommend them. That's how I've been doing these tanks. Next, what I'm going to do, since we have an auction coming up at our fish club, is I'll be taking the CO2, which is a small 2.5 pound can, and I will set it up on that tank, which I don't normally do, which can cause an algae bloom. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to blast those spotlights on the new trimmings and basically try to power grow them the next with like 10-hour days of light or 12-hour days of light, intense light. 60 watts on an area, very small, all those trimmings, and we'll try to grow them, and then at the local fish auction, I can sell those, $5-10 for 5 or 6 trimmings of a plant, and that's 10 times cheaper, 5 times cheaper than a lot of your local fish stores, and you help your local or your fellow hobbyists out. So thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it helps you out. I didn't get into the particulars of how and why you cut certain plants certain ways and what algae do certain things and how to get into that. But these were just a general way to upkeep your tank. And if you have multiple tanks, you only need 2 for this system, really. And you can kind of do it in one, but really this is the 2-tank approach that I really enjoy, and it's great for new tanks like this one that isn't all balanced and it still has these algae blooms and things. If you enjoy it, like, subscribe. I have a Patreon page if this saves you money. I know you spend $100 on plants sometimes, or $50 or $10, and then it dies right away, or it gets so much algae, you try to get it off, you pull it off, you rip the leaves off. It's just a bummer when that happens. But I'll put a link to my Patreon in there too, and if I saved you some money and you enjoy the channel and you want to help me keep doing what I'm doing, you can also support me that way. And also we have live streams where I can give you basically firsthand, just me talking on the chat with a couple people. It can help you out if you've got more questions about your specific tank. There's also a Facebook group called the Secret History Living in Your Aquarium Facebook group. You'll find it if you look. I hope y'all are taking care of yourself so you can take care of your fish and those around you. All right, guys. Keep on swimming. Keep on taking care of things. And I hope I'd see you next time. Stop that. All right. I hope you see me or my fish next time. I guess I won't see you. So that's why you need to be on Facebook. All right, guys. Take it easy. Have a good day. Bye.